BSN's Motoring 96 is brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, the intelligent oil for longer engine life. And Midas, the way it should be.
Bill Gardner once told me that when it came to cars, the best advice his father ever gave him was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, the Ford Motor Company obviously never met Bill's dad. You see, for the past few years, the Ford Taurus has been #1 in North America in the competitive family car segment. So who would fault Ford if they made a few minor improvements to the 96 model? Well, Ford said, that's not the direction we want to go. So they have invited the media down here to the Charlotte Motor Speedway in North Carolina to check out the brand new Ford Taurus and Mercury Sable for 1996.
The Taurus and its sister car, the Mercury Sable, have been a major success story for Ford since the car was introduced in 1986. Ford sells over 400,000 a year in the United States alone, and that amounts to over $7.5 billion in annual sales. But Ford decided it was time for a change. 5 years and $2.8 billion later, Ford was ready to launch the new generation. But how about that advice offered by Bill Gardner's dad? He put the question to the man behind the design of the new Taurus, Dick Landgraf.
Well, I would say that that's poor advice in the car business. I think you've got to change. If you don't change, you're going to die because the competition is going to go around you. It really isn't a question of whether the car is broken. It's a question of maintaining its modern appearance and improved functionality. So that's really what was behind the 1996 program. It was to improve customer satisfaction with an overall better product.
Trying to expand the market a little bit, and I think we're going to be able to do that. Obviously, we want our existing owner body, which is huge, to fall in love with this vehicle, and our consumer research and our research with those owners tell us that that's going to happen. But we'd also like to broaden the appeal of the vehicle, pick up some of those Camry and Honda intenders and get them over to our side.
I would describe it as a very sporty four-door car for a person who has requirements for more than just the minimum amount of room in a car, that perhaps has a family or perhaps doesn't have a family, but somebody who does want 4 doors, wants a very sporty look in a car which delivers the best value in the segment. Most people who are interested in a car like this will buy it because of its size, and if they really don't need the size of this car, they will drop down and buy what we call a CD-size car like a Contra Mystique. So while there's clearly some overlap, we think it's relatively small, and the overall size and price differences between the two cars should minimize any of what we call cannibalization.
Ford has been a leader in promoting the short-term lease. It's not by accident, then, that the launch of the new Taurus comes at a time when a vast number of these leases are coming due.
We're going to be actively soliciting those owners to come in, take a look at the new Taurus and take a look at the new Sable, and we think that we'll renew 60 or 70% of those Taurus Sables that are coming due this year. So there's a huge owner body out there available to us. They're very happy, and they're looking for something new too, and so we have something new to give them.
How long have you been in this business? Is it tougher today now to sell a car than it was to design a car?
Well, I worked for Ford for 32 years, going on 33, and yeah, it gets tougher all the time because the competition gets tougher. There are more models available now. There's more manufacturers in the U.S. market, and it's every year it's just tougher and tougher. I've never seen, and nor do I ever think we will see, a period of time when life gets easier in the automobile business, and that's true in I think most businesses. Competition gets tougher every year. We're really in a global economy. We're not competing only among a limited number of manufacturers. We're competing worldwide across all the major markets. So I think that means it's going to continue to be a tough business.
This is the latest legacy, the Outback Edition. Now Subaru suggests this vehicle is a viable alternative for your average sports utility. Is it, or are they just blowing smoke? We'll have the answer for you at the end of this test drive.
To give the Outback the basic requirements of a sport utility vehicle, Subaru has raised this wagon by 1.2 inches. This puts the ground clearance at 7.3 inches, meaning it is within an inch or so of the competition. Not only was the suspension jacked up, but the components themselves have been beefed up to handle the rigors off-road. The suspension itself is fully independent and features McPherson struts at all four corners and stabilizer bars at both ends. On-road, the suspension offers superior ride comfort. Now this has been accomplished without sacrificing anything in the handling characteristics. Indeed, on the skid pad, the Outback flew through the pylons with both body roll and understeer being kept to the absolute minimum. A lot of the credit here goes to the fact that the centre of gravity is relatively low despite the height of the vehicle. Off-road, the suspension performance is equally good, with the largest bumps being swallowed in stride. The long travel nature of the suspension design helps to keep the tyres on the ground, which obviously improves traction. Now this, when off-road, is imperative. Helping the overall feel of the Outback is the speed-sensitive rack and pinion steering. It affords a great deal of precision and superior feedback for the driver.
The Outback is offered with a choice of two engines, a 2.2 litre 135 horse that comes with a 5-speed manual, or this 2.5 litre twin cam that puts out 155 horsepower. Now while the 20 horsepower may not seem like much, believe me, it makes a world of difference when it comes to the feel and performance of this vehicle.
The reason the 2.5 litre boxer engine delivers the needed punch is the fact that it produces 155 pounds-feet of torque at just 2,800 RPM. This not only gives you good pickup off the line, it also gives the vehicle the power to tackle the steep terrain found off-road, despite the fact that it lacks the low range found in most 4x4s. The only transmission available with this engine is a 4-speed electronically controlled automatic. The four-wheel drive system itself is state-of-the-art, employing a multi-plate wet clutch to distribute the power front to rear. Technically, it is similar to the clutches used in any automatic transmission, except that it is designed to allow some slippage which eliminates the risk of drivetrain wind-up. Depending upon the conditions and the available traction, the system can split the power from 70-30 in favour of the front wheels to 30-70 in favour of the rears. The fact that the electronic control units for the automatic transmission, the all-wheel drive and anti-lock brakes communicate with each other, the effectiveness of this system is maximised. You'd have to do something pretty radical to get the Outback stuck. Anti-lock brakes are standard on the Outback, the system being of the 4-channel variety. During the brake test, it hauled the Outback to a halt in just 117 feet from 80 kilometers an hour. Both the pedal feel and the activation point of the system are better than average.
As well as lifting the entire vehicle, Subaru also raised the roofline. This accomplishes two things. First of all, basketball players would not be squeezed for headroom, and secondly, it gives the cabin a nice, bright, airy feel.
The interior of the Outback is nicely attired with all the usual power options being in place, as is cruise control and air conditioning. The nice part here is that Subaru keep all the controls as high as possible, meaning they fall within your usual line of sight. The notable exception is the radio. As with most other Subarus, it sits a long way down in the center console, which means you're forced to take your eyes off the road if you're going to operate it. Elsewhere, the Outback gets a nice large set of analog instruments, dual airbags, and a front seat that can be lifted via a simple handle. The seats themselves are supported and covered in a durable cloth that is more in keeping with the tougher image of a sport utility vehicle. The rear environment will seat 2 adults in comfort and 3 at a squeeze. The available trunk space is generous at 36.5 cubic feet, with the split folding rear seats in the upright position. Fold both halves down and the volume increases to 73.6 cubic feet.
Well, that's it for this edition of Test Drive. You know one thing, the Outback is not a sport utility vehicle. That said, it does offer most of the advantages and none of the drawbacks. Therefore, if you drive it in the same manner as about 90% of all the true sport utility vehicles, that's primarily on rough roads like this, or for gaining access to the cottage, the Outback has got what it takes. You never could quite understand the allure of a pickup truck for personal transportation, but the more I've lived with this Tacoma, the more I understand why people like this type of vehicle. First of all, it's very handy and very practical. You get a very commanding view of the road ahead, and unlike most pickups, the ride on the Tacoma is actually quite civilized. To date, the only thing we've found wrong with it, the coffee cup holder's a little too big. You end up spilling coffee all over the gear shift lever as this one has.
Well, there's a practice session ongoing here at the Charlotte Motor Speedway, North Carolina. Of course, the practice session we're here for is taking place on the inner road track as the media from Canada and the United States test drive the brand new Tauruses and Sables. But now we're going to leave the track, head to the garage, and visit a man I know would love to be here at the track when the Winston Cup Series visits, and that, of course, is Bill Gardner.
Brad, you're right. I'd love to be out at the Charlotte Motor Speedway. I'm a big NASCAR fan, and every once in a while I put the Richard Petty shades on there and pretend a little bit. But what I want to talk about over the next couple of weeks is some engine technology, part of which used to be the exclusive territory of those race car guys. What we're going to start out with is a cylinder head off a 4-cylinder Ford Escort GT. This is a late model car, and it has 2 valve per cylinder head. You can see each combustion chamber along here, and intake valves along this side of the engine, exhaust valves along this side. The intake valve is the larger one, and over here you can see the intake manifold, and on this side of the head would be the exhaust manifold. We've already removed it, but this also explains to you the term cross flow when we're talking about cylinder heads. Intake tract and exhaust tract on opposite sides of the cylinder head is how you define a cross-flow cylinder head. In any case, what I want to talk about mainly is the fact that 2 very similar cars can have very different service requirements when it comes to valve adjustment. This one on the Escort GT requires no adjustment at all thanks to hydraulic lifters. Now over here you can see this exhaust valve in this particular cylinder is in the open position. This cylinder was on the exhaust stroke, and I can pass the screwdriver between the valve and the seat. Over here this valve is seated and the intake is slightly open. Now every time the valve touches the seat, that's when it gives up the tremendous heat that's generated in the combustion chamber into the valve seat and into the cylinder head water jackets so that it can cool down. If that valve is held slightly off the seat by an improper adjustment or a tight valve train, the valve will quickly burn out. Now in the Escort, they use hydraulic lifters so that you don't have to ever worry about periodic valve adjustments. And when I turn the cylinder head around, on this side you can see all the rocker arms, and I'm going to remove one of the rocker arms and pluck the hydraulic lifter out of the cylinder head so you can get a look at it. Over here you can see the valve springs here all the way along, and it's a pretty simple deal to unscrew that rocker arm, and I'll set it aside. Now in this bore in the cylinder head is where the hydraulic valve lifter lives in this particular engine, and because the engine was fairly clean oil-wise, it comes out easy. Now you may notice something, the trained eye may notice that there's a few water droplets or globules of water on this lifter, and what actually happened with this engine, the reason it's torn down to this stage is that the cylinder head gasket blew. But that's where the hydraulic valve lifter lives. There's the end of the camshaft, and the camshaft's running right through the head, right in there. You can see these bosses right here where there's bearings that it rides on. And these lifters, hydraulic lifters, isolate the valve train through oil so that you don't require periodic adjustments of the valve train. Now next week I'm going to show you a 16-valve 4-cylinder engine on virtually the same model year Honda Civic. It's a higher RPM engine, and these hydraulic lifters that save you maintenance on the Escort engine tend to be a little bit of a liability on a high RPM engine like the Honda 4-cylinder, so they use what we call solid lifter camshafts that require a little bit of clearance out here between the rocker arm and the valve stem, and that's something you have to adjust periodically. So next week we're going to show you that. And till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 96.
Accidents do happen, even on test drives. This 1995 BMW 750 had the misfortune to be traveling through an intersection when it was rammed by a vehicle running a red light. Although the damage was extensive, nobody was injured in either car, and even BMW chose to look on the bright side.
Well, the bright side is that we talk about all our safety features, our passive and our active safety features, but we don't normally get a chance to demonstrate them. And fortunately for you, and fortunately for us, we've had a chance now. No one got hurt, so there's no problem there. And the car came through with flying colors. The amount of intrusion into the passenger compartment is minimal. The windows didn't even shatter on the passenger side, which is exceptional. And the car demonstrated that it was up to the task that it was designed for. One of the big innovations of the 7 Series was when it was introduced last year was the diagonal door beam and the extremely stiff body. Now, the diagonal door beam mounts at the front top here at the hinge and at the rear down at a hook right there. This hook on the door actually hooks onto the main body of the car, bypassing the hinges of the door and the locks of the door, and it's much stronger. Looking at the damaged side of the car, you can see that the brunt of the load was absorbed by the horizontal chassis member as well as the vertical B-pillar there, and the diagonal door beam, and you can actually see an imprint of the door beam right here where the car slid off underneath it. And because we can still open the door, you can see that the hook here actually did impact the B-pillar. It dented it, as it's supposed to, and latched the door onto the B-pillar, providing much stronger side impact protection. You can tell that the door is not damaged on the inside, therefore if there was a passenger in the car, that passenger would have been fine. And really there's relatively minor damage to most of the car, so the car is salvageable still.
An estimate of what this might cost to repair and how they'll go about it?
Well, probably what we'll end up doing is replacing this side of the car, so we're looking at probably $20,000 to $30,000.
They put a whole new side.
They put a whole new side on the car, yes. So the car will be as good and as strong as new.
Will test cars still be made available to Motoring 96 in future?
Well, we'll have to see about that.
The Dodge Stealth seen here on Motoring 91 is about to become a collector's item. With sales softening, Chrysler has decided to drop the luxury sport coupe following the 95 model year. Dodge is Chrysler's strongest division with plenty of new product available, from minivans to trucks. The Stealth is built in Japan by Mitsubishi, and after Chrysler drops it, the Eagle Summit will be the only vehicle it imports from Japan.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns stabilizer link kits. Just about every car on the road today has a stabilizer bar incorporated into its front suspension, and many cars have them on the rear as well. It's a husky piece that rarely breaks. However, out at the wheel, there are some components in this system that are subject to a lot of fatigue. Now, as the name implies, the stabilizer bar stabilizes the attitude of the body, particularly when the car is cornering. If it's broken or loose or worn, any of the components in that system, you'll have excessive body lean or roll when you're cornering, and you'll probably notice some rattling or clanging noises when you go over potholes or bumps or around corners. Out here at the wheel is where you really have to pay attention. The stabilizer link kit, this part I'm pointing to right here, which is made up of 4 rubber bushings, a spacer sleeve, a bolt, a nut, and some washers, is subject to an awful lot of fatigue. It also rusts significantly. As you can see, this one I have in my hand here is rusted away considerably. It's gotten really skinny in that area that passes through the rubber bushing. Now, replacing it is a pretty simple deal, and the stabilizer link kit isn't an expensive part on most cars. And if in fact there was a problem with it, you'll realize some significant handling gains once you've replaced it. That's your Midas tip of the week.
See those 2 cars driving in the left lane? You'd never see that in Europe. More on European driving habits next on Kenzie's Corner.
Kenzie's Corner with Jim Kenzie.
I just got back from a 3-week tour of duty in Europe. Now, somebody's got to drive the BMWs and the Porsches. It just happens to be my lot in life. But the one thing that always surprises me driving over there is how safe I feel compared to on our own superhighways. I mean, in Germany, we're going 180, 200 kilometers an hour. In England, the pace is a little slower, about 90 miles an hour, which works out to 145K. But then again, I'm sitting on the wrong side of the car, shifting gears with the wrong hand, driving on the wrong side of the road, and having to deal with those roundabouts. So why do I feel so safe? Simple. Their drivers have a clue. Now, every country thinks they've got the worst drivers in the world. The British car magazines are full of letters to the editor complaining about this habit or that habit. The German magazines probably are too, but I don't read enough German to figure it out. If these people only knew. I was home exactly 10 minutes, driving home on the airport expressway, and there's an airport limo plugged in the left lane doing 85 kilometers an hour. Bad enough the speed limit's only 100, and I've got the only airport limo in the world not trying to set a land speed record, and he's hogging the left lane. 5 clicks later, a full-size Ford van full of construction workers doing exactly the same thing. Now, I've got kids I haven't hugged in 3 weeks. I've got to get home. I have no choice but to pass them on the right, which is not a very safe thing to do. And on my right, what do I see? A green Toyota Tercel, obviously a rental car, and the driver's got the map of the province spread out over the steering wheel. Welcome home, Jim. Now, what is it with British drivers and German drivers that makes them so good? Are they genetically superior to us? Well, I can't believe that. I think it's better training and it's better law enforcement. Now, in Ontario, we've just gotten rid of the scourge of photo radar, although other jurisdictions in Canada are introducing this tax collection scheme. But instead, the Ontario Provincial Police now have traffic squads whose job it is to look for bad driving habits like tailgating and lane swapping, shoulder running, even sandwich eating. But we've got to get more awareness of what constitutes these bad driving habits because most people don't understand them. We're also got graduated licensing in Ontario now, but it's going to take many years before even the majority of our drivers are graduates of this new, tougher licensing program. So what we have to do is to have the media get more awareness of what constitutes good driving and make people more aware that there are advanced driver training programs that you can use to upgrade your skills. All we can promise you is that here on Motoring, we're going to be doing our part. I'm Jim Kenzie.
Well, they're wrapping things up here at the Charlotte Motor Speedway in North Carolina. Now, this week we've met the men and women behind the new look, brand new 1996 Ford Taurus and Mercury Sable. Next week, we'll revisit, as we do every week, with the man behind the wheel on Test Drive on Motoring 96, Graham Fletcher. He'll tell us if the beauty is more than just skin deep. That and more as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
TSN's Motoring 96 has been brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, the intelligent oil for longer engine life. And Midas, the way it should be.